with regulations in terms of how much disinfection byproducts can be in the water. So that is sort of the balance that all public water systems have to maintain, is to be able to what we call simultaneous compliance with a variety of different rules, regulations, and maximum contaminant levels.
So could I just ask about, so some of these things are compliant with the secondary water standards and not with the primary one. I have an S next to like iron, chlorine, and something, chloride. I don't see chlorine, but I see chloride, so I assume that's how you measure.
Sodium hypochlorite is used throughout the system.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I assume this is measuring chlorine. It's a pseudo.
No, well,
because they
chloride's
must
a little
go
bit
back and
different.
forth.
Yeah, no, chlorides actually can come from like road salts.
Yeah,
you know,
they
the
could come.
association of sodium chloride or calcium chloride that is used to de-ice sort of roadways.
Right, of course. But the fluoride levels that I saw listed were like 4 for primary sources, and here it's 13. It's most of them around 14 or 15. I saw a range in another city thing that said it can go from 0 to 15, and that's okay. But you have listed here that the standard is 250, which
Correct.
is the secondary, what they call the secondary
Right,
water
primarily
standard. So
from
what does that
aesthetic.
mean?
So that's a great question. In general, when we talk about maximum contaminant levels, the EPA looks at what we call primary maximum contaminant levels, because these are contaminants that, if exceeding these levels, have the potential to cause health effects. Things like chloride, iron are considered secondary standards because they're primarily from an aesthetic perspective. So if you have too much chloride in the water, it's going to taste a little bit salty. It's going to be aesthetically pleasing. Too much iron in the water could cause it to give it a little bit of color. You could get a staining of your laundry if you have too much iron in there. But then again, iron is good. I mean, a lot of us, myself included, I take a daily vitamin that has a lot of iron in it, a lot more than that. So that's why there's a distinction between the primary and secondary. So we also recognize the direct potential public health threats, but also aesthetic qualities of the water as well, because we want the water to be pleasing.
Also bear in mind, since you're a biologist and study physics, is that some of the piping systems in the city of New York are large cast iron based systems. When you increase the chlorine in the water, that causes some degradation of the iron on the interior, which adds to the iron count in the water.
Right, I get it, no chloride. But, okay, so the other issue is that at least one of the fountains had pHs, Cabana Field have pH of 9 practically, which isn't standard, right? So why do they have a pH of 9?
Well, that appeared to be water that might have been sitting there for a while. And again, pH was not necessarily sort of a standard. New York City does alter the pH of the water to, again, we talk about the simultaneous compliance. So one of the big things that we are very concerned about, not just here in New York, but everywhere, is the corrosivity of the water and the potential, as was mentioned before, leaching of other sort of metals out of the
high or
water.
low pH.
Correct. So New York City does increase the pH primarily to help prevent the leaching of lead that might be present in fixtures, or the pipes within your homes. Not necessarily from the copper, but many times there could be old lead service lines, or the solder that was used years and years ago did contain lead. Brass fixtures do also contain some amount of lead. And so New York City does add what we call caustic soda to sort of raise the pH.
The pH of distilled water is 5 and 5.5, so you have to raise it.
Well, usually what we call neutral will be like 7. Anything less than 7 is considered to be more acidic. Anything greater than acidic we consider basic. And so New York City tries to be somewhere around 7.5 to 8 on the pH scale.
You have to add something to that.
Correct. Basically, keep the pH up.
It's the balance between dumping sodium hypochlorite to kill bacteria, and then adding sodium hydroxide.
It's acidic.
Sodium hydroxide to raise the pH and keep it balanced around 7.
Exactly.
And as you're talking about billions of gallons of water flowing all the way from upstate through the mains and distributed out the city, at any given point along the way, that balance is going to change. And within that range, depending upon whether you're going through a wood main, or a PVC main, or a copper main, or a cast iron main, or, and soldered stuff, you're gonna pick up stuff along the way. The pH will cause electrolytic cells and cause ions to leach out of whatever material you made out of, and corrode it faster. And you go down in other areas, like down south, like the water comes out red, because they got so much iron and other stuff in the water.
Yeah, I live in California,
Yeah.
Southern California.
And,
You couldn't
and
drink
they
the
do water
and you
softening
couldn't
to try to
even
get,
shower
eliminate
in
some
the
of that.
water Because it had so much salt, it had sulfur and other things in it, it was coming from.
And then
the
groundwater
river.
versus surface water too, groundwaters tend to have a little bit more minerals, so that's why I said, you know, with New York City being from upstate reservoirs, you generally have, very soft water as opposed to hard water, which is in many cases a blessing.
Okay, so we shouldn't be too concerned when
Okay.
when it meets the secondary standard, but not the primary standard, is what you're
Yeah,
telling
and all of these met, there was, in this report here, there was no exceedance of any primary water standards.
So why was the water turned off then in these
They didn't
parks?
have these results yet,
Right, okay.
and when there was immediate public concern, they turned off the water.
I see. So the idea was that as a precaution, you turn off all the
Right.
water, then you did the survey of the backflow devices to make sure that that wasn't causing a problem.
Actually, turning off the water skewed the results of it, because the water was standing.
Stagnant for a while,
Stagnant,
some of the,
yeah.
probably some of the higher heterotrophic plate count numbers.
Right. And then, now you turn some of them back on in some parks because of you've determined that they have backflow
Just the
devices.
spray.
So we've only turned on the spray part.
The spray park, but you haven't
Correct.
turned on any of the drinking.
That's right.
Any of the drinking fountains in the central parks, so that
The South Point one is
South
still
Point's
working.
on, Lighthouse is on.
Lighthouse is on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw
by
Lighthouse
Oc-
on, even when you said, so I was wondering, because
Yeah, by
I went by a
Octagon.
couple weeks later and saw that.
Yeah, by Octagon it's on, where the line is proven.
So they just need you to read the back of something like the Poland Spring mineral water bottles, they might have higher mineral counts than some of the water you're getting out of this.
Not only that, but
And-
if you get real bottled water, there's actually bacteria.
Yeah, but the other thing that's
From the
funny is
spring.
that people are drinking from bottled water because they want cleaner water, but then you have like, you know, 1 billion plastic water bottles thrown out in trash that degrade and cause PVC leaching into the water supply, so.
Exactly.
Yeah, we do like to promote public water. It's a great asset to the community. But I would say that we also do regulate bottled water here in New York. So anytime if you do happen to buy bottled water, look on the little label. It does have a New York DOH certification on there. So we do certify and regulate bottled water here in New York State.
Thank you.
So one indicator that this was like first straw testing is when you look at the temperature on this.
Temperature, and I think some of those also had like the
Nice.
chlorine residual levels. Some of them were either very low or non-existent.
Temperature has
because it
to
was
do
sitting
with
there
air
for a
Well, it
while.
says
So we've had
temperatures in
some
the
hot weather.
seventies and the eighties.
It was sitting there for a while.
It
Yeah.
was-
What would be the temperature if you were to run the tap for a little bit and get your DP?
That's a great, interesting question. It's going to vary from the season because, you know, even
This time of year.
this time of year, you're
60s?
probably in the mid to high 60s. I've seen like 68, or maybe even getting in some cases far reaches of the city system, you know, closer to 70
So
degrees.
that brings
Okay.
me to my other question about future testing. I mean, does it make sense to test in the winter? I mean, it's gonna have a lot less, bacteria don't do too well in cold weather, so.
Fountains are turned off.
Yeah,
in
we
the winter.
turn off the fountain, blow the
In
alarms.
Yeah.
October?
Yeah.
But I was wondering if we were gonna do any testing, it doesn't make much sense to me to be testing when the weather is cool.
Yeah,
And
but
when
there's
it's
a
warm,
couple
it's
things.
more
One is
likely to
that
show-
we're obviously not running the sprinklers and most of the water fountains are turned off, so all that water would be sitting, if it's not completely flushed out, it would be sitting.
So when you do turn them off, do you flush them out first?
Yes.
Any other questions?
And, tomorrow you were mentioning that we're looking to have, contract with plumbing firm.
Yes, and then also irrigation landscape contractor. So my colleague Mary is working on upcoming RFP for landscape and just upkeep of the landscape, irrigation on the back. So that's also a separate contract. So between our on-call plumber and landscape company, we hope to have a comprehensive program for the irrigation system.
And some of the buildings, like Manhattan Park, that park in front, has a sprinkler system. Have we checked with them to make sure that they have backflow filters?
I have not, but we can do the,
And that's also, I don't know if that's true in the South Town where they have the big parks in between the buildings.
Yeah, they have sprinklers
I
too.
think they have sprinklers
And
too.
those were put in by the building, not by
They're
us.
probably, they were put in pretty recently, though, I imagine.
That doesn't mean they put in
Correctly.
correctly, that doesn't mean that they're new.
yeah, we can not then we'll reach out and then, we can update you at the next meeting.
Okay.
And the drain at the church is being done.
So, I
We
guess,
don't have to pay to fix the elevator and everything else. in the
We're also
walk-
working on that. Now, like Susan said, you look at the island left and right, it's thousands of things I can point out that we have to repair. So we're going by priorities, like safety being the first one, obviously. So we're working on the elevators as well, which will be at the board meeting, and we also present the elevator concept.
Okay.
so, I guess you can't really answer all the questions about timetable yet, because you still.
No, we're waiting for this report.
How will we be informed as to the timetable, as to when the next landmark is reached and when the next decisions are gonna be made? We would like to be kept in the loop.
Sure, we'll keep you in the loop through our public information officer, Melissa Robinson.
These
But,
will be discussed at the operations meetings and at the board meetings, it'll be public
I personally
discourse.
just can't go. I'm just-
Yeah.
To
Well,
go
they're
to those,
recorded.
to be at meetings at 5:00 or 5:30 is just not in the cards for me, so,
Well, as soon as we get this engineering report, we'll share it with you.
I'd say very broad milestones is that by the end of the month, we're hoping to have the engineer's report finalized with next
Right.
steps for above-grade backflow prevention devices with enclosures at all of our parks. And then hopefully between, say, late winter and early spring, we'd look to actually implement and construct those above-grade
we'll do
devices.
that in the winter.
No,
We have
late
two,
winter.
yeah, we have two RFPs, so it's gonna be, by the time we get the process done,
Somehow
Detail
that's
it's
gonna
gonna
take
be
anywhere.
longer than
in
that.
spring, like before spring hopefully.
And then, the other issue, I mean, is that I think, I don't know, is this report a public report now? This one?
I don't know.
These reports have been released pursuant to FOIL, and I'm gonna play lawyer for a minute, to Susan's comments that we're gonna share the report. We may or may not, there are certain things about our infrastructure that for, security are the reasons why we don't release, and there have been some FOIL requests that we don't release how everything is built, all our blueprints and everything to
How
anyone
about
under
this
FOIL.
This particular report?
That one has already been released,
It's already
and
been
you can
released,
take
it's-
that today
Alright.
with you, it's
And
been
so
released
when you
pursuant
say
to
it's
FOIL.
released, anyone can get a copy?
Anybody who files a FOIL request can have a copy.
Alright, and, I don't know if I have anything else.
Pursuant to us looking into the water fountains on Roosevelt Island, what we found through the Parks and Recreation, through Community Board Aid, is that the other parks on the Upper East Side have been regularly tested for lead, but not tested that we know of for some of these other things, and whether or not their parks are compliant and have been set up correctly. So this has become a broader issue than just on Roosevelt Island, so I wanted to make that point also.
Actually, while we're here, because we have not been involved in the school lead problem and the other issues that went on with the school water fountains, we may as well ask you we don't know, I guess you don't control what goes on inside.
We have no
the school.
jurisdiction over it.
And they
And
get
that
the
wasn't
same
an
water-
issue just for this school, those were all New York City schools were
Yeah,
being
I know,
tested.
but of course, there's great concern on the island about our schools. I mean, we of course are concerned about other schools too. What do we know? You don't?
We know nothing and we have no jurisdiction over it, it's the Board of Education.
That's
I
another
agree.
issue for us, and we don't know how to handle it either. It's really an issue more for the PTA and things like that to do, but we'd like to at least
Yeah.
become.
Well, we did have a contact when the issue regarding
You spoke
the
to
rat
Manuel.
problem. We had a contact at the Board of Ed, and perhaps we can resurrect that contact for you.
Well, if you would, I think that there is a lot of concern on the island about drinking water in the schools. I think since many people send their kids to school in Manhattan, of course, it's a general problem.
Mhm.
There was some concerns about our buildings too, at one point. Is there any reason to test the water that comes out of the building taps, or is there, they're coming from the, you know,
The water
people were
from the
concerned.
mains are obviously good. In
I would
the
think they
older
were.
buildings, you may, I mean, depending on the plumbing fixtures going from the mains through the building.
Well, that's what I'm asking
like,
about, really. Should we be concerned, should we be talking to
I don't know
the
that we
building?
can
Roosevelt
comment on
Landing is an
that.
older building, so they may have some lead issues given the age of the building. I'm not sure, I mean, the original wire buildings were constructed in the seventies,
Right.
when they may have had some older plumbing, but
It's not your concern, though, it's their concern, it's the building's concern.
Yes. the building
Right,
is-
it's
I
not
lived
that
in
we
the
don't
city
care,
in
it's
a
just-
building that was built in 1930 something, so it was probably than here. But that's something that's part of the building responsibility, not us.
Right.
If I could maybe just add something to that, both with the schools and with the building. So, you know, there was a new state regulation that all public schools, including in New York City, throughout New York State, did have to test all their potable taps for lead. And if they exceeded the action level, that they had to take those taps offline sort of immediately. So in terms of being protective, if a tap, whether it be from a drinking fountain or from a sink that could be used by a child for drinking purposes, exceeded an action level, they have been taken offline, and schools throughout the state are in the process of going through mediation to fix those sort of problems. So that is sort of a statewide issue that's been going on. So, and you could probably check with the schools, because schools were required to, on their websites, to post both, not only the sampling information they had, but also some information about what they're doing to remediate them. And then for the buildings, and as we discussed before, older plumbing could potentially have lead. I mean, there is a general suggestion that people, just as we talked about the fountains sort of sitting there for a while, it is suggested that people do run their taps for a little while, collect that water, don't wanna waste it, you can use it to water your plants, if you will, inside your house. But let it run for a little bit, because that will then get rid of that first draw where the water has been sitting in
Right.
contact with, you know, the metals that may contain some lead. So you reduce your potential for exposure. And we also, if you are even more concerned, we do have a free lead testing program offered by the state, as well as New York City DEP, I think through 311. Here in the city of New York, you can also get a free lead test within
So,
your apartment
Do
if you
they
want.
still use lead in the joints?
Side of the joints.
Side of the joints?
It was common in the seventies, and they
Still
dropped.
There was a ban,
When-
national
when was it
ban
banned?
in the 80s, right?
In
In
the 80s.
1988 was the initial
So
ban.
buildings
for-
being built before that could have
Yeah.
used.
I mean, you look back from going from the sixties all the way through the seventies, the miracle material was asbestos, you know? And and it was common to solder copper pipes with lead, you know? I mean, everywhere they did it. And some of the early polyvinyl chloride piping leached all kinds of stuff. The earlier versions really changed the standards for both wastewater handling and primary inbound water handling. Some of the hot water handling systems had issues, but and the standards changed. You have to discover that both the standards were changed and also over time that the materials decayed, responded to their environment differently. So it's not like things weren't, you know, you could say some things are malicious, but generally speaking, it wasn't, just they learned that was a bad idea. You can go back to like the 1950s, 60s Scientific Americans, and they were like, oh, this miraculous material, asbestos, you know, it was like used in brakes and it didn't react with anything and was fireproof, and, you know, they wanted to use it in everything, and, you know.
It was used. Anything else? So it's just a matter of keeping us in the loop. We will write up what the notes we took, because we want to inform other people.
And if you have any
I am
follow-up questions.
I'm a little perturbed to learn that I mean, it's not your fault, obviously, because this was installed years and years, maybe in some cases 40 years ago, but it is sort of perturbing to know that, to learn that there were no backflow devices on the lines with the irrigation system. Now, I'm not an alarmist, so I don't think it actually probably damaged anyone's health, but it is sort of strange, because that regulation must have been in effect for a long, long time. I don't think that is just recently put into into.
Right, but that's also why I got upset at the other meeting, was because not only did we hire contractors to put this stuff in, but we also had hired engineering oversight to watch those contractors. And no one, and we asked in the meetings, is well, these done according to code spec? Yes, everything's fine. And unless the board wants to go there and watch them, which we can't do, we thought it was done according to spec.
Was there any legal recourse? I mean,
Oh,
if
no.
they
Not
supposedly
this
did
way.
it and they didn't do it, so.
Yeah, that's how, at some point, when we get out of break fix, we can review some of our, as we start building maintenance logs and things like that, we can find out when these things were originally put in, as they're going through some of these boxes of records, and which contractors are touching them. If we find there's a pattern of contractors where we've had to go and replace them, or things that ain't worked properly, maybe we, never ever use them again, or
Oh, that's exactly what we're doing.
unfriend them.
Whether, exactly, no,
No,
it's
sure,
100%
sure,
true, and
sure.
that's what we've been doing, whether it's with our electrician, we got a new electrician on board.
Right.
Steve is trying desperately to close out some of the projects and just move on with our life and forget about those guys. So it's definitely something that we are in process of doing, evaluating for our contractor. The ones that are good, they're good, and we keep them, but the ones that are not performing as we would want to, then they're not gonna come back.
Approximately when was the backflow standard put into place? So I'll go back to need to go, and say it wasn't a requirement.
Well, again, this is, so, the requirement is on the public water system to have some sort of program in place. I think their backflow, it probably goes back into the early nineties.
So it's
I'd
not-
have to
it wasn't,
double check
it
that.
wasn't in place in the seventies when they were.
I don't believe so. But
Yeah, what's interesting about that though is in 1972 when they did Lighthouse Park, that original design had backflow prevention in it.
Okay, so that's why they're there now. You said they were in Lighthouse.
They're
And
consistent.
they were firefighter field too. Okay, so we're looking forward to the resolution of this. I mean, either by having new bathrooms with water fountains or having the old ones at least.
Till the next crisis hits.
Did we learn something we didn't know before?
Right, and this is not gonna be affected by flooding again or anything like that. I mean, we had flooding from the hurricane, but all of this is protected against.
The things we worried about as far as the flooding issues go, one is corrosive damage to the railings and the seawall.
Yeah, I know.
We had lots of issues with corrosive damage to the electrical and lighting systems, all the light stanchions around there. Got really destroyed by the seawater when it hits. There was also some damage to some of the other equipment on the interior side of the promenade, because the water came all the way up and flooded the promenade.
Right.
So some of the benches, some of that got all corroded out underneath.
But the water system itself.
The water system is,
Pumps, you must have, is
Yeah.
there any pumps or is this comes down?
the issue there is when we look at some of these submerged valving systems,
Okay,
there, like you said, it's not pumped out, so if you have an inflow of brackish water, it's gonna fill up that well, and that can cause corrosion to the plumbing materials
So that's
down in
what-
there.
all right, but that's
That's
big
something-
pipes.
The big
Does
pipes are
anybody
designed.
inspect them or how
No,
does it
I mean,
work?
they're designed to last for 80 years, so, what we have to worry about there is just mainly ionic effects of brackish water hitting, when you get fresh water on the inside and salt water on the outside, it causes the materials to corrode faster. You're basically making a little battery, but, that's something to worry about, and if we put in the heated ones, that would be totally destroyed by brackish water.
Okay, so heated ones are for what purpose?
If you wanted to have the fountains on in the winter time, where you had to have like heaters for the
We
backflow
We have
valves.
to turn them off, which I think is.
Yeah, we're
probably
not
right.
doing that, so,
The alternative would be to bury everything.
below the frost line.
Yeah,
That's right.
right, so you could have valves, you could have water fountains that work through the winter, but everything would have to be
Right,
deep
so, but even,
entrenched.
even for that though, what you see now are these RPZs above grade, so you're at 48 inches below grade, and then you come back up, and then you
Right.
have all these check valves, and then you go back down to that 4 feet, so that's when you would put, again, what's called a hot box.
Right, so it's
Which
still,
is climate controlled year round, just so that section of pipe and the pipe
Doesn't
down to 4
freeze.
feet doesn't freeze.
yeah.
So what is the depth of the water now? I mean, what are, how deep are the water?
All the points of connection are at 4 foot below grade.
So when you're putting in these above grade elements, hopefully there'll be some thought about tripping hazards and
Absolutely.
all the other, that they're not blocking any handicap accessible pathways and all that other good
That's
stuff.
So the above grade, we have above grade backflow prevention at, firefighters field, that's in the box right at the EDC ferry, so potentially that is susceptible to flow.
They didn't do that when they renovated.
It is, it's in the comfort station in South Point Park, that's also above grade. It's really, we're just really talking about Blackwell Park and, Capo Bianco. So Capo Bianco, I believe, will be safe, because we're more or less on the ridge of the island. The point of connection for Capo Bianco, Al Lewis, is in the sidewalk. We bring that service into just beyond the outfield fence, put it up on that high point behind it, and kind of screen it out with vegetation.
Generally speaking, the water systems aren't terribly affected by, the storm and flood damage, because they're designed to be waterproof by definition. The things that really get destroyed in the island are the railings. If you notice, like after last storm, all of them just totally rusted out.
We complained about that last year and learned that you're.
Yeah.
The committee complained and learned that you're replacing.
They got covered, well,
I hope you like
there's a
them.
plan
I
to,
like them, but I don't know what's taking them so long to do it. I think, because they take down a section and it could be, I don't know, a month or two sometimes or more. It seems like they don't have parts coming in or something, because you'd think that they would just do a section at a time, replace them and then move on to the next section, but they take down a bunch.
yeah,
And
that's
then
annoying.
we wait and we wait and we wait, and that's, I mean, it's aesthetically one problem, but it's also a little inconvenient. Sidewalks sometimes are closed.
Yeah, the other thing we need to, you'll hear if we have major storm damage, is that a lot of the lighting up and down the promenade,
Right, you told us.
that goes out, because the electrical systems aren't necessarily completely waterproof, and they get rusty corroded out. And the control switching at the base, if the poles get flooded out, they get corroded out too, and that's always a problem for us.
That's something we're also working on.
Yeah, the
Maybe
ones
you should
over
work
at
on.
Manhattan Park are blinking every night, right now, they're having a problem.
Where?
So what's the time?
By Manhattan Park,
As
They're not-
of this
Frank
week?
reported that.
As of this week?
it's been there for a week, yeah.
Because we've been, so we've got run 3 of the repairs, so, we
Yeah.
have PSV and other people checking at night to see what's going on.
Well, I happen to know for a fact it's still blinking, because my bedroom window is.
I just wanted to get the status of it. No, I reached out to our electrician again, I did come and we have, like you mentioned, we have a lot of wiring issues. And we're trying to avoid having to rewire everything, because obviously it would be expensive, excavating all that, but that's something we can discuss.
Yeah, we did that when I first joined the board, one of the biggest items on the board was that over half of the lighting on the whole island was out.
Making progress, and we're
Yeah.
above the half now, we have like a cluster of hard locations, but we're making
Even up and
progress.
down Main Street, only like 1 in 4 of the streetlights were actually working. We had a whole separate lighting system, and then we switched over to city center lighting, so we can get parts easier. But the stuff that was put in the 70s was some weird stuff that was
Yep.
constantly breaking
Right,
down.
thank you very much.
Okay.
So, if you
Showing face
want to
that
come
No,
to
yeah.
our operations meetings, if you can, I think.
Well, I don't know when they are exactly.
We published them,
Yeah.
we're gonna schedule out.
Yeah, Michael is our chair, and
Yeah,
we go
I
through.
know they exist, I just.
Yeah. And if you have any other questions or follow-ups, or your notes are confusing, please reach out to Steve, he'll clarify whatever you need.
Right, that's the main thing is whether I can remember my notes from this weekend.
Well,
That's what I'm saying, reach out to Steve.
In prior years, we had a schedule for the year sent out,
Yeah.
and we didn't do it last year because there was a lot of other stuff going on. We developed a schedule, both for the operations meeting and the governance meeting, we're gonna be publishing shortly, as soon as they get the final, weigh-ins from the other committee members, and we'll put it out for probably a year when they're gonna be.
That would be useful, because it's really pretty hard, and kinds of stuff. on
You see it from my
schedule, so
side.
It's hard to. I'm
It's
sorry.
like, I was like, the reason why I didn't do it last year is because I was supposed to be deployed to Kuwait for a couple of months, and then just before the day before I was supposed to hit the plane, they changed my LOA, and ended up not just going to Kuwait.